With that, I'd like to recognize my good friend from Texas, Mr. Moran, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of the witnesses for being here today to share your testimony. Thank you in particular for putting national security policy and foreign affairs policy ahead of politics. I appreciate that. Your commitment to improving our future behavior by evaluating our past decisions is underscored by your presence here and the testimony you've given, and I deeply appreciate that. Colonel Crumrick, I want to start with you. You mentioned that in your testimony that the administration's timing and, quote, selective intelligence blindness were two of the three fundamental flaws that directly threaten the military plan and mission execution. That was from your testimony. I'd like to know, in your opinion, what is one of the most grievous or egregious examples of, quote, selective intelligence blindness attributable to the Biden administration during the Afghan withdrawal process?
There's a number to choose from. I think the key piece is when you have over 100 years of experience between those three four-star generals, and they're telling you, based on all of this experience, that we need to hold off on the withdrawal until the conditions are met. And these are the reasons why, operationally and based on the entire intelligence community telling you that this needs to follow the conditions. When that was not followed and the decision was to go to this diplomatic island in Kabul, at that point it was the biggest mistake made by the administration. They should have listened to those that had been living it, those that had to endure the losses there, and failure to do so was catastrophic.
And the reason why we put those conditions in such agreements is because if they're not followed, then the obligation for our activity then goes away. It's a basic principle of law in any contract. There's conditions preceding. If those are not fulfilled, then the other party does not have to fulfill its commitment or obligations. And in this case, you're saying we just ignored the fact that they didn't fulfill their conditions preceding. Is that true?
That is correct. Well, that is correct.
You also said it's well known that between May and October is Afghanistan fighting season and the Taliban are at their strongest. In the strategic plans for withdrawal that were offered to the administration, was this a well-known reality related to the administration?
Absolutely. There's 20 years of experience, the Afghan fighting season. Everyone was aware of it.
But it seems like in their execution of plans, they ignored that reality. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
How high would you rank timing as a means for a successful mission when considering the Taliban's season of aggression that was well known for decades?
It's extremely important. Some people focus on courses of action, but I would always argue that the timing of your operation absolutely matters just as much.
One more question for you, and then I'll move over the dais. But to the best of your knowledge, what agreements, if any, did the U.S. make with the Taliban after Kabul fell?
I am not privy to that answer.
Does anybody at the dais have an answer to that question? Colonel Kalinda, do you know as well? Or
I do not.
Command Sergeant Major?
I do not either.
All right. Colonel Kalinda, I want to come to you and thank you for your testimony. You got about a minute and a half, but I want to give you just the opportunity to talk about anything that you've not been able to emphasize today that we need to take away as a lesson from this botched withdrawal as to what we need to do differently in the future. What lessons can we learn that we haven't discussed today?
We need to take a yes and approach to these disasters. We need to, of course, look at the immediate disaster of the withdrawal and evacuation. Also, what got us there, because if we don't, we're going to wind up in another war that ends up in disaster. So I offered, three of the immediate causes of the collapse, and these rhyme across Vietnam and Afghanistan. I mean, the first one is the Afghan government never bothered to gain the buy-in of the Afghan people. As Colonel Crumrick said, they became a predatory kleptocracy, government of thieves, where positions were for sale for exorbitant amounts of money. A police chief in a big province might go for as much as $3 million US. And in exchange for that, buying their position, they were able to use the position to make the money back through land theft, kidnapping for ransom, extorting our aid and development dollars, et cetera. And all these actions pushed Afghans into the arms of insurgents who were targeting and killing our soldiers. A second major reason is that, as Colonel Krumrich said, the Taliban were much more innovative. We got very complacent over 20 years, believing, we in the Afghan government believing that we could do the same thing over and over again and expect similar results. But when the Taliban are innovating militarily, politically, diplomatically, eventually by the summer of 2021, they had the upper hand. And sadly, many Afghans saw the Taliban as the lesser of two evils. And third and finally is we have got to create some sort of doctrine that helps us build developing world militaries much more effectively. We can't afford to make them in our own image and likeness. It doesn't work. There are other models that would have made the Afghan military more sustainable, able to stand on its own and not simply collapse like a house of cards. That's our fault, and we should fix that.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.